Welcome to Scope Creep, the show that shines a light on what it's actually like to build a business, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I'm Jamie Cox.
And I'm Liz Talego, and we're both entrepreneurs in the business of building businesses. Every other week, we'll dissect the myths behind being a solopreneur, call out the celebrity entrepreneurs who push the passive income dream, and talk about the real benefits of being your own boss, from choosing how and when you spend your free time to building a career where you call the shots.
Let's take a #unfiltered look behind the proverbial curtain and learn how to build a values-based business where you're healthy and wealthy. No manifestation or vision boards required.
Welcome to episode 4 of Scope Creep. Today we're talking about how to sell yourself without selling your soul, aka why there's a direct link between being yourself in business and keeping well-paying clients coming in the door.
But before we dive in, you know what time it is. It's happy hour, and we're spilling the tea on how our weeks actually went. So Liz, what was good for you this week?
The sun is shining, the birds are chirping, there's some tulips coming up in my front yard, and so also my allergies are flaring up. All of this points to a personal victory of mine, which is I survived my first Michigan winter.
Yay!
So adios, seasonal depression, until next time, but I'm just, I'm feeling really good that like some sunshine is literally in my life right now after a lot of long, cold, gray months. What about
Yes. Yeah. The sun changes my whole outlook on life, honestly. It's wild how that happens. But this week it's been a busy week, but also like a weird slow week because I'm in between two projects. But the good side of that, it's like a little weird, but the good side of that is I'm getting to like focus my attention on some things that have been on my radar for a while, including a really fun photo shoot that I want to do for Strange Salt, the collective that we're both in. And I just haven't flexed that muscle in a while, like the creative photo shoot art direction muscle in a minute. Like really since I was thinking about it, and I was like, I guess I haven't done this since like 2019. So anyway, I've been working on that. It's super fun. It's super like back to the conversation of like showing yourself in your business. Like that's what I'm leading this photo shoot with. So anyway, very exciting.
Love that.
Yes.
That's super exciting and such a good example of like the whole working in your business versus on your business thing, and sometimes the friction that exists between attending to both of those. So it's easy to forget that like working on your business is not just like insurance and accounting. Sometimes you get to do fun stuff too. So.
Yes. And the fun stuff is like, I mean, obviously the fun stuff is what I enjoy. But it makes all of the like boring accounting stuff worth it.
Yeah,
so,
totally.
Well, what totally sucked?
I am in a state of contract purgatory limbo. One of the blessings of being in this business a while is I've gotten to a point where I can bid on like bigger and more complex projects, and there's just a lot more that goes into getting to the point where you're signing the contract, you're kicking things off. There's like a lot of moving parts, and especially when you're talking nonprofits, they're notorious for having exhausting approval rounds that can just take a really long time. So, you put a lot of effort in putting your best face forward, and you send off a proposal, and sometimes it can be weeks, sometimes it can be months before you hear something, and you pray to sweet baby Jesus that you don't get all yeses on all the contracts at the exact same time, or all no's. So I'm just in this place of like, come on, let me know what's going on here, people. I want to know what the next couple months are going to look like.
Yeah. I put, I don't know if you do this, but I put like contract expiration dates or proposal expiration dates, but I'll admit, I'll be the first to admit they're not like hard and fast. They're more just like please respond by this date.
Please just let me know.
If they do, great. If they don't, I'm like, okay, here's the proposal with a new date.
Yeah, I do that too. And I've just learned, maybe it's because of my industry, I have to give people time on those, more time than I would prefer. So it's just kind of the nature of my business.
Yeah. Well, especially when you're working, like you said, with nonprofits or like bigger organizations, it's like there's just so much more red tape than it is when like if you and I were working together.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty straightforward, pretty simple. So,
Yes.
but all good, all good. I'm just being my impatient self. So,
Oh yeah, of course.
Stay tuned. Maybe I'll have an update on that next time we talk.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Similarly, I feel like I'm in this like slow, it's not really slow. It's just like I'm between two projects. So I've had this week of like slower time.
Yeah.
And I just like go into a state of panic for some reason. I think anybody that does this work can relate to that. Like oh no, what's next? Da da da. Like, and you see other people panicking, and I kind of feed off of that. Like people are like the economy, and I'm like, should I also be stressed? I don't know, probably, but I'm trying not to be. So anyway, I'm just like in this weird. That's kind of been my low this week. Is just like riding that roller coaster of like, okay, I have a few, like, it's like I have an hour free during the day and I'm like, oh my gosh.
No. That's kind of, I feel like a theme in these episode kickoffs, the highs and lows. It's like you and I, any chance to panic, we'll be right there.
Yep. Yeah, I keep my cool until I do not keep my cool.
Yep. Very relatable. So if that's you too, listener, you're not alone in that.
You're not alone. Samesies.
So it's hard to believe how many episodes into this we already are. It's been such a long time in the works, and then it seems like the actual production is flying by, which is exciting.
Yes.
And I know over the past few weeks, we have been tackling some kind of really big picture topics like barriers to being in business and being yourself in business, some real shit you can't skip, if you will. So today we're going to pivot a little bit. We're going to build on those two topics specifically, but we're going to get into the weeds on something a little bit more tactical. And we're going to attempt to answer what is the number one question we get from people who are either making the transition from full-time work to freelance or starting out their service-based business in kind of this digital space. And that is, how do you guys get paying clients consistently? How do you keep the wheels of business turning? And so we're going to attempt to answer that for you and give you guys at the end some shit you can't skip on that front if you want to have a sustainable business.
Absolutely. Yes. Truly, this is like the question I get all the time. And I never really have one answer for it because I think it's like different in every season of business. So I'm super excited for this conversation to just talk about like all those different ways that business has happened, whether I was looking for it or not.
Yes. And there's the proverbial sales funnel, right? Like there's a difference between getting enough of your people into the room and then getting yeses from a certain number of those people. And both of those parts and all the parts between those two are important. But maybe we could kind of just start high level. Like for you, when you think about growing your audience, having potential people to pitch to, things like getting people, like I said, in your room, what's your go-to strategy on that front?
I mean, networking. And I know everybody's rolling their eyes. I can hear it. I know we're on a podcast. I can hear everybody rolling their eyes. But I think like truly networking for me is a huge, I'm good at it. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I'm good at talking to anyone. I could talk to a wall. I talk to my dogs all day. Like I could talk to anybody. And I think that's why networking is such a big like lead generator for me. But I guess it's not in the way that like, I'm not going to like networking events or like happy hours, like cringe. No, I'm not doing that. That sounds, every time I do, I always get trapped like talking to the one dude in the corner, like, and I'm like trying to inch away to the bathroom and like making like eyes at people like, please save me. So I do not do that sort of networking, but I'm more so like, I keep up with people that I know a lot. And I, even if that's just like once a month, if somebody I used to work with, I'm like, hey, how's it going? What's new? And just to kind of like, hey, I'm still here. And these people, it might not even be my clients, but they're people that know other people, for example, like that, who knows, their cousin, their mom, their best friend might be starting a business. And they're like, oh, I need to introduce you to so-and-so. And I think people often discount their own network that already exists. And just don't put stake in like, they're like, oh, my friends and family are the only people that follow me on Instagram. Well, guess what? They know people who are like running businesses. So
Yeah.
anyway, that's like networking is the way that I get a lot of it, and like referrals, all of that. What about you?
Similarly, networking, relationships, but I also like have many memories of going to like a chamber of commerce meeting or a women in business meeting, and inevitably I'm like in the corner with someone who sells life insurance,
Yep.
and that's the person who might be very lovely, who I might enjoy speaking with, but like I haven't gotten a lot of value out of some of those like really mixed bag in-person experiences for me. We'll probably talk about this on another episode, but I will always preach the value of niching the fuck down and
Yes.
being very clear about what you're the best at doing. And for me, I've found the most value in networking online in digital spaces that are very niche down. So for me, that's a lot of like health tech and specifically mental and behavioral health tech spaces. And so this might surprise some people, but the majority of my business comes from Slack.
Ooh, tell us more.
Yeah. So whatever industry you're in, this is not unique to me, but there are communities. Most of mine are on Slack because I'm kind of in tech, and that's kind of the adopted ecosystem of how we communicate in a lot of these communities. And they're super focused on people working in healthcare and technology. And I used to only be a member of one or two of them that were super focused on what I do. And so I just make it a point to show up there and to engage in conversations, to not just take, to also answer questions and be like, oh, you need someone for this. I know someone for this. Like, let me make an introduction. And then if I see someone on there making an introduction, I'm like, oh, that could be a potential lead, or that's somebody I really want to know. I also then add them on LinkedIn and say like, hey, I saw your post over in such and such Slack channel. Would love to keep in touch about XYZ. And so I'm using that not only to meet people in my niche and network in that space, but also then taking it out to LinkedIn, and LinkedIn also feeds into my newsletter and things like that. So it kind of builds upon one another. And, as my industry grew, I got into more and more and more of these channels. And I literally make it a point to show up there Monday through Friday and check them all. So one little tip I'll give that I found recently is that if you are in Slack communities with people you might do business with, but it's hard to keep up with, Slack has a tool where you can insert keywords that will let you know when someone's talking about something.
Oh,
So
I didn't know this.
yeah. So in my Slack channels that are specifically in my niche, right, I have this layer of alignment. I also then go in and add keywords. And for me, that's like messaging, content, product, curriculum, designer, brand identity. And anytime I don't get like an alert on my phone, that would be too much. But
Yeah, I would be overwhelmed.
can
I
go
would
in
be
and
like,
say,
I
"Oh,
hate Slack.
just a streamlining thing, like, oh, someone is talking about this thing that I might be able to help with, or might be able to point them in a certain direction. And so it's part like, be a human, show up, be where your people are, but take the fucking shortcut. Like,
Yeah.
don't make yourself crazy trying to read every message or every post on LinkedIn or wherever that might be for you.
Yeah. Oh, wow, I'm definitely going to research that some more, because I am also in a lot of Slack groups. And I think, like you said, showing up and being willing to like enter conversations without the intention of getting a sale out of it too. Like if somebody has a question in a Slack group, I'm happy to respond with like my 2 cents, especially if it's about something I know. And I'm not going to end it with like, and check out my website to learn more. Like I'm going to be like, hey, and let me know if you have other questions. I'm happy to help. Because I think when you enter those situations, like a networking situation, whether you are like an in-person person or a Slack person or a LinkedIn person, entering those conversations with the intention to provide value, to not only gain, but to also give, is so important. And I think that's where people get networking completely wrong, and why it feels so gross to a lot of people is because everybody enters it wanting to get something.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just like, it feels gross. It feels so grabby. Ugh, hate it.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're talking about 2 things here. We're talking about like, where do you show up? For me, it's a lot of Slack and LinkedIn, not so much on the IRL meetup. Same thing for
Right.
you. But then there's also this layer of how you show up.
Yeah.
and how you can be present in those spaces in a way that is not only helpful for those other people, but like feels good for you. I genuinely like mentorship. I genuinely like contributing to something positive.
Yes.
Amongst my peers. I like giving back to people, like to new content strategists and writers, and helping them if I can. So I think a lot of times people, when they hear networking, they cringe because unfortunately a lot of us have been on the receiving end of that kind of grabby shit where it's like, oh, someone just wants to know who I know, or someone just wants to pick my brain, right?
Ugh.
And it doesn't feel like mutually beneficial.
Yeah. I occasionally will get a cold, I hate a cold message on LinkedIn. If you're doing that, guys, stop. Looking at you, tech bros.
Well, wait a minute.
I'm coming for you.
Give an example, because
okay,
everything's always cold until you know the person, right? So you have to start somewhere. But what do you mean by that?
Yes, I mean the people who have seen me. This is like in recent, since the podcast launch. I don't know if you've seen this, but if every time I tag hashtag podcast in a post on LinkedIn, I get like 5 messages from people who are like, hey, I can increase SEO on your podcast. Like that is their open message. It's not like, hey, I listened to the show and really liked X, Y, and Z. Like it's no personal connection. It's like, here's what I do.
Yeah.
And it's just, it doesn't work, guys. And it's like, I think like we are all ingrained at the LinkedIn cringe, and that is the source of a lot of it, is the gaining. Like want to gain something. I don't even know what your podcast is about, but let me tell you, I can make it better. It's like, fuck off.
Yeah, fuck right off with that. I've gotten a few of those too, and I just don't understand the rationale of people who slide into my LinkedIn DMs who obviously have not even read my profile.
Oh, yes.
You're not only wasting my time, you're wasting yours there, friend. Like we're not even in the same industry, or we like what you're looking for. I can't help you with, and you would have known that if you had taken the 2 seconds to look at my profile.
Oh my God. Can I tell you, I know we're getting off track, but I just have to tell you.
Go do it.
Okay. So I got this connection on LinkedIn, like a request, and it was somebody that I was interested in having in my network. I'll say, like, I looked at his profile. It was like web developer or something, like something that would work in relationship with what I do. And I was like, yeah, would love to talk to this person. Okay. I get this message from him. That's basically like the first message is like, hey, thanks for connecting. Excited to, learn more about what you do, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, hey, yeah, thanks for connecting. I'll reach out. Like cause I'm not like a LinkedIn conversationalist. I'm like, if you want to send me an email, like, hey, we can talk here.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Things spiraled. He immediately responds with, I love your profile picture.
Oh,
it looks
no.
like, I know. He's like, it looks like, you look so happy. Like you're smiling at a loved one or a great friend. And I was just like, listen, even if your intentions are pure, this is cringy and creepy as hell. And so I was just like, unfollow, unconnect, block.
Gross. I have been there, and you do not know how many times I've been like, can we just start screenshotting the LinkedIn dude to slide into the DMs? Like, can we? Because LinkedIn used to be, for better or worse, just pretty dry and therefore safe from Chad. I'm just going to keep using that name. But yeah, that sucks. So
anyway, I say all that to say LinkedIn is like great, but also a crapshoot for me.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's this like, okay, where do you show up? It's the how do you show up? But then there's like the reality that your time that you spend on these platforms, you don't have a lot of it, because we're all doing other things in our business. So you kind of do have to approach this stuff with a little bit of strategy. Yes, being authentic is important, but what is your approach as far as what you share there in this authentic way so that it is bringing value to your business? It is ultimately leading to those sales and conversions that keep you afloat.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I will say, I don't think I've ever made a post on LinkedIn that has been in any vein of like, and schedule your free consultation call today. Like I've never made a post in that way because that is just like, I mean, first of all, I don't even know if the LinkedIn algorithm would like that. They'd probably like fire me. But secondly, like nobody's going to do that from a LinkedIn post. That's just not how our brains work. Like if I see somebody like, hey, I'm schedule this free consultation call, post on LinkedIn, I'm like, skip. So I'll say that to begin with. Like I'm never making any sort of posts that are true like selling. And I think when people think about selling their services, networking, all of that, like it feels gross and it feels scary because traditionally it has been so like truly salesy. So I think I go about LinkedIn in a way where I, like you said, try to provide value by kind of sharing like my thoughts on topics that people are having conversations around. And I'll say that's like maybe in the brand strategy realm, but also in like the working world. And you kind of have to look at platforms like LinkedIn as like everybody's playing there. So how are you talking to the most people, not just people who are looking for a brand strategist? So one thing, like I post a lot of unpopular opinions there about things that people are talking about. After our episode where we talked about imposter syndrome a lot came out, I posted like my hot take on imposter syndrome and the Harvard Business Review article. And like those sort of things are the things that people are excited to have like conversation with about in the comments. I'm not one of those people that's like build in public. I mean, I think there's value in that, like showing transparency in like what you're building. I'm not really building a product, so it's a little different, but I'm not really one of those people just because I'm like, this is too much. Like the stuff I do every single day is too much to post on LinkedIn. So I'll say, I think I try to be transparent there. I try to post like unpopular opinions, but I also share, anytime I'm sharing like client work, I think that's one of the best lead generators for me is sharing the work that I've done on behalf of my clients, but never in the frame of reference of like, wow, look how great this work is that I did. It's more like, hey, congratulations to Nashville Vocal Studio on this recent brand launch. Yeah. It was super fun to work with them. This is what they do. This is who I worked with on the project. This is kind of how we approached it. So giving that kind of like behind the scenes look without being like, and I'm the best person there ever was. Anyway, that's the sort of stuff that I kind of try to share. And with the behind the scenes work, it's also a way for me to like give people a look inside my process without being so overtly like, and here's my process. So there's like ways, I mean, people are smart. They will connect the dots. You do not have to tell them every single detail, I guess is like the point of that.
No, you don't. But I think anybody that's looking to up their LinkedIn game, absolutely go give Jamie a follow, because one thing I'll say about you is you are very consistent and very human on that platform. And I aspire to be as consistent as you are. And I'm working on it. And like you, I share, critiques of things like, what do I think about this trend that's relative to my industry? So again, lots of unpopular opinions, but I do also try to, if I'm calling some shit out, I'm also then thinking, okay, also what's a solution for this? How can we make this better? And I also try to be very generous with, people that are busy, executives, founders, etc. These are my people. They're busy. They don't have time to necessarily do a deep dive, read my ebook. Maybe they do, maybe if they want to. But I also try to post things that maybe spark an idea, get them to think a little bit, get them to maybe start dipping a toe in some of the like messaging strategy that I do, but in a much simpler way. So get them thinking, get them, some buy-in, essentially solve a little problem, while then, making sure that I'm top of mind, that when you're ready to solve the bigger problem that this is related to, I'm right here.
Yes. But. And also, I will say, I feel like I'm the least consistent person on LinkedIn because I feel like I only get on there when I'm feeling fiery.
I don't know. Maybe you're fiery a lot then, because maybe. If you're not consistent, fuck.
Well, I was going to say, I feel like you're on there a lot posting things that are like, I was on there this morning, checking, this is like turning into a show about LinkedIn, but I was on there this morning responding to something that somebody tagged me in, and I saw your post, and it was like basically giving like founders, CEOs kind of like a step-by-step process of how to audit their messaging. If like, hey, if you're not getting responses on things, maybe consider this. So I feel like you are consistently, while I'm consistently fiery on LinkedIn, you're consistently providing value to not just your audience. I think that's the other thing. Like, you're also engaged with your peers there, who, again, that's your network of people who are going to refer to you. I'll say I get referrals more from the people I work with than the people I work for.
Interesting. And that, that doesn't have to be that way, but that's an interesting approach. I also am a person that like shits on LinkedIn.
Oh yeah. I mean, I love that, honestly, because I think we're all thinking it.
Well, there's a lot of data out there to support the fact that, social media is really doing not so good things for our mental health. And I think it's easier, we'll get off the LinkedIn train in a second, but I think it's important to mention that like LinkedIn, while maybe a necessary evil for our networking and our, lead generation efforts for our businesses, it's still social media. And I would argue to just be wary in those spaces, because that is perhaps the platform that is most BS.
And most toxic too.
The least real. Like,
yeah. Oh, yes. I could, sorry, I'm holding back all of my thoughts on this because I'm like, we have to move on.
Yeah, we have to move on.
Goodbye, LinkedIn.
Goodbye, LinkedIn. I think whether it's LinkedIn, whether it's Slack, whether it is showing up in real life, like, approach it as you would other aspects of your business. Take it seriously, but be yourself and do what you can to be consistent in those spaces, and think about how can you demonstrate who you are, whom you serve, what you stand for, so that people get to not only know what you do, but who you are, and you can, set down that road of know, like, trust that ultimately leads to doing business together.
Yes, absolutely. I think any good client, and this is like across the board, I think any good client, you are probably going to have some relationship with them before you sign a contract. Even if that's just like a few calls before to get to know them, or you have a mutual connection, like, there has to be some level of trust that is developed in your like lead generation process in order to make that person a good client and for you to be a good fit with them. And I think we were kind of talking before we got on the call about like that sort of process of the lead, like qualifying process, and how you kind of go through that once you do have a lead. So can you share a little bit about like, I don't know, what are your like the key things that you do between the time you meet somebody and the time you close a deal?
Yeah. Well, again, like we talked about last time, for me, it starts with being unapologetic about who I will and won't work with and my values. You can take a look at my website and you can see, if you believe X, if you believe Y, if you believe Z, you're in good company. Let's do good work together. If that's repelling to you, you're already not going to be on my list. I also do simple things like when someone books a call with me, they have to give me certain information. So I use Calendly as my platform to manage that. And, it's not exhaustive. It's not going to take somebody 20 minutes to fill out a questionnaire. But I make sure that I understand the problem that they're currently wrestling with, like what feels most important to them, and whether that's the problem that they actually need me to solve, remains to be seen. But I try to get some level of understanding of what they're coming into the conversation with. I have a question about monthly content and marketing spend. So, I have some minimums in there where if you don't have that, in your budget, maybe here's some free resources that I've created that I can send your way that might be helpful to you. And then as things grow and you have a bigger budget, call me. Let's work together, things like that. And, I pull from my mental health background a lot in these conversations. And one of the things I always love to ask people after we're done with kind of like the getting to know you, a little bit of small talk warm up in these conversations is like, what feels most important from a content perspective to talk about today? And I let them know from the jump that we're going to talk about that. But my goal and the purpose of this conversation, whether we work together or not, is for me to use what I know to help you solve that problem.
Yes. I love that. And I love the idea of having like the one question in those kind of introductory conversations that tells you a lot of information. Like
Yeah.
they might answer thinking they're answering one thing, but they kind of give you way more information that they don't even know. They don't even realize that they're giving. Like they are probably sharing like their maybe hesitations around content, or they're like, I don't even value content at all. And you're like, okay, like they're telling you a lot by not saying some things too. So I love that idea of like having one leading question in those conversations.
I always try to let them know that they're in my view, those people are always the experts in their business. I'm their strategic partner. I'm their listener. I'm here to help, but you know your business better than I do. And you know what keeps you up at night and is freaking you out right now about what's coming down the pike and what you have to solve in the next quarter. And my job is to listen, reflect back to you what I hear you saying, take some time and sit with what you're telling me, audit your existing systems and whatever it is that we're looking at, and provide some ideas of how to solve that. And I might do that on a 30-minute call, and we might not work together. Yeah. But I find that the focus, kind of shifting the focus from how much can I, like, how big of a retainer am I going to get out of this person? Or how that's important. We have to have like alignment on what I charge and the budget that you have. But in shifting the focus to providing value and removing that fear of like, oh my God, if I give it all up for free, you're not, then I have no value. I got to keep some stuff hidden. Trust me, if you have something of value to provide, if you're a service-based business, you're not giving it all up in a 30-minute discovery call. If you are, we have bigger problems.
Yes. If you can do your job in 30 minutes like that, let's talk.
Positive intent. Be humble and try to help people solve their business problems using what you know about your industry. And I can guarantee you that's going to build a strong foundation that's going to build trust, so that relationship is going to be in a place where you're more likely to get that yes.
Yes. It sounds like we have a similar like onboarding process. Well, not even onboarding process, like vetting process, I'll say, where, people will come to my website, however they get there, and they'll fill out a form. And I also, y'all, PSA, include a line item, like a field in your form that's like, what's your budget? You can leave it open-ended, because a lot of people, I don't love to leave it open-ended, because a lot of people will say, I don't know, what does it cost? Put ranges, put a minimum, whatever that is, like be transparent in that, because that'll save your time too. Like if this person's like, I don't have any budget, they're probably not your customer. Like, no, it's just, so make it, vet people before you have to vet them, I guess is my point. But I also really value like this, like having a call with somebody. It's usually a video, conversation, sometimes just a phone call, because first of all, we're living in the internet wild west. Like getting on a call with somebody face to face, quote unquote, is like, I don't know, it just develops some level of trust. And then, like you said, providing value in that conversation. So I usually lead my conversations with what are your marketing goals for the next year? I'll usually say like, tell me about yourself, tell me about what you're working on, what you've done, and what you're moving toward. That's kind of like my guiding question in the call, because I think it can go a lot of different ways. And again, they tell me a lot more than they maybe intend to, just by like the things that they leave out. I think that's helpful to kind of know. Totally. And then, I always try to answer at least one of their questions with like a tactical thing they can do, whether that's on the call. I'm like, hey, have you thought about doing this? Or in a follow-up email, I'm like, hey, I was thinking about this conversation we had around X. It's just like a job interview. I was thinking about this conversation we had around X, and this is what I'd recommend. And it's just like a quick idea. I don't give them like, and here's an entire analysis of why this will work. It's like, hey, I think you should explore this. And I'm also very transparent with everybody that I'm like, listen, if we don't work together, my feelings are not going to be hurt. Like I want you to find the best fit for you. And I think that also develops some layer of trust with people too. I'm not like so attached to my own ideas or them that like they feel like I'm going to be devastated, or I know I'm not going to be devastated. So approaching some of those sales things like that with like they could say no and it doesn't matter, really helps it not hurt as much when they do say no.
Right. And it also, I think, removes like the slime, the ick
Yeah.
factor. I think so many people are struggling, even though they could be doing great work and helping lots of people, because they get on these calls and they freeze, or they're afraid to get on the call to begin with because they have it in their minds that in order to get a yes, you have to be like the sleazy used car salesman, and you have to use these fear-based tactics and these scarcity mindset tactics
No.
that just are so manipulative and so gross, and so, I think, for both of us, the antithesis of our values for our brands. But the problem is we're not seeing a whole lot of examples of the alternative. And I think you and I are examples of the alternative, but we're here just talking about, oh, how do you get clients? We're not like, here's our 4-part sales script that will make you 6 figures next year. No, we're not saying that. We're simply saying, instead of putting the focus on how much you can take from somebody and how much you can charge somebody, come in with a service mindset. Come in with a, how can I support? How can I help? Do your vetting, be efficient, but you don't need to force anybody to do business with you.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's like any healthy relationship. You should not have to chase somebody
No.
to want them to be with you. This is relationship advice and business advice.
Well, I mean, one and the same. Business is built on relationships, so it makes sense.
Okay, so Liz, we've talked about like the actual sales call, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
How do you close the deal or say goodbye to the deal once the call's over?
So it depends how it goes. Sometimes, and I'll know this at the outset of the call because I have that questionnaire that you have to fill out before you book. I have one productized service. It's a messaging intensive called a Messaging Matters VIP Day. That is the only thing that I have. Steps A, B, and C, they're the same every time. It has one price. It's a 1-day service, and it's for people that kind of need like an infusion of strategy, but maybe aren't ready to bite the bullet on a more long-term retainer. So in that situation, we'll get to the end of the call. I'll reflect back to them what I heard. If it sounds like that would be a good fit for them, I'll say, so from what you've told me, this is the challenge, and you really need, this messaging support right now. And so in my mind, I'm thinking it might make the most sense to start with a messaging intensive. What do you think? And then I shut up.
Oh, yeah. Knowing when to shut up is key.
And one, that's me asking them. That's not me telling them. It's asking for their input. It's establishing this collaborative norm that I'm like, not ramming this down your throat. I'm asking you what you think. I'm telling you what I heard. I'm asking you what you think. And that's a great way to get buy-in because it kind of forces them to do the same thing, to listen, to think, be like, oh yeah, actually, that does sound like a good idea, or maybe not, but usually at that point in the conversation, they're pretty bought in, and I can tell. So I allow them to intentionally opt in to whatever I'm suggesting in kind of that straightforward sense. But oftentimes, because I do strategy work, I never write the same agreement or retainer twice. It's really individualized per client, and oftentimes there's a lot of moving parts. And what that means is we've talked about strategy, we've talked about writing, we've talked about consultation and audits and all these things. Don't feel like on the fly on a call, you need to write your retainer or you need to write your proposal. Usually what I'll say at the end of that call is, so I've taken lots of notes, which I do, and I think I have a really good idea of some different options for you. So what I'm going to do is between now and say tomorrow or whatever your schedule allows, say, I'm going to shoot you an email with a couple different options with some estimates, and we'll kind of go from there. Again, what do you think? Oh yeah, that sounds great. And I do that. At that point, I will go and I will synthesize my notes into like a tiered option. The most basic, something in the middle, and the fucking Cadillac. And I will write like really briefly, hey, it was great to meet you. Really enjoyed learning more about your work based on our conversation. Here's what I think would be most helpful. If you have any ideas for things to add or tweak or questions about these, know that I'm totally flexible. And I really want to make sure that you get the service that's right for you. And then I send it off. If I don't hear anything in a couple days, I'll follow up. But once they pick a plan or pick an option, that's when I go into the creation of like the branded bells and whistles proposal. I've learned that I don't do that, which is kind of a higher lift for me until I know for sure the service that they're interested in purchasing. What about you?
Yeah. I think, again, really similarly, once we're on that call, I never feel like I need to be like, and this is exactly what we're going to do, because I mean, I'm like that on any call. I'm like, hey, I need time to process this information. I'm more of like an internal processor in that way. So I usually, I'm taking notes as well. And I'm like, okay, here's what I'm thinking will happen. That's what I kind of give them that, like, this is kind of how I think my process can fit with what you're trying to solve or whatever that looks like. And then I'll say, I'm going to work on this proposal. I'll usually, if they haven't given me kind of an idea of a budget, I'll once again ask them to set expectations too. So I'll say, do you have a budget in mind for whatever project we're working on? And it usually goes one of two ways. They will say, yes, it's, between this and this, again, just like a job interview when somebody asks you your salary range, or they'll say, I don't really know. Because I just don't know what to expect. Like, can you give me some idea? And I'm always happy to be like, well, this is where my brand strategy, like discovery brand strategy written document, like starts. And that's where all of my projects usually start there in some form and fashion. So like at the barest sense, this is what that costs.
Okay.
And I can usually gauge their reaction to that. Sometimes they'll be like, oh, okay, cool. Or they'll be like, oh, and I'm like, if that's out of your budget, like I'm happy to send it over anyway, and you can think on it, and then we can pick it up, when you want to talk about it again. Right. So I always kind of set that expectation before I leave the call. I also set the expectation of like, this is what you can expect next from me. I'm going to send you a formal proposal. I'll outline everything in it. So when we get off the call, I actually do that. I actually take not a long time to do it, but Fridays are my proposal days. So I'll go in, make the proposal, send it out again. Like you were saying, like, hey, great to meet you. This is what I'm thinking. I again outline that proposal kind of high level in the email, ask for questions. And then I also like do the follow-up thing where I'm like, this is what you can expect next. I'm going to reach out to you next week if I haven't heard back. I'm also like, and if you don't want to work with me, tell me, because I do not want to blow up your inbox. Like I say that to everybody. Don't ghost me because I don't want to be chasing you. Right. I don't want to bother you. If you don't want to work with me, just tell me. And I honestly think that minimizes my time so much when I'm not sending emails, following up on a proposal forever. Right. And if somebody is like kind of stringing me along after like 3 emails, I just put it in their court and I'm basically like, they'll reach out when they want to. Yeah. So closing the deal, I don't know. I mean, there's no like hard and fast way, I think, to like definitely get a yes. But I think for me, it's really expressing like, this is what I heard you say. This is how I think I can help. And I'm also like, hey, and let me know if you want any of my like references. Happy to send those over too. Or if you want to talk to any of my previous clients, I've done similar work with them. Like just trying to be transparent from the get-go. I also tell people, I think you'll find I'm really easy to work with because I am.
You are. Because you have your shit together. And I'm going to step back into the woo space, even though I said I wasn't going to. But just when you just said like, hey, this is what I think would help. Like in my body, that feels like there's no ego in that. There's no pressure in that. There's integrity in that. And as somebody that has, hired people and hired strategists to help with my business, I have been a victim of the hard sell of the I know best and you need to listen to me. And it just feels gross. So it's part like being a decent human and approaching people with dignity and respect. But it's also like that way of being has incredible value from a monetary perspective, because I really do believe you're going to get more yeses with that aggressive stuff. And like, know that when a client hires you, especially, if you do work similar to the things that Jamie and I do, you might do a project 1 year, but if you treat them well and you deliver and you are easy to work with, one way of keeping clients coming in the door is to keep the same ones coming in the door. And that prioritizing the relationship is a really great way to make sure that that's more likely to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I know next episode we're going to talk a little bit about this too, but just to tease this out, I think being easy to work with looks a lot of different ways, but one way I kind of approach that too is like, not the client is always right, because they aren't. If you work with clients, they are not always right.
Yep.
But I think approaching everything, this is like networking, the client making weird requests, approaching everything with like a sense of curiosity and wanting to learn more about it so you can come up with like an accurate solution that's going to make sense is really important. But anyway, sorry, that's part of, being easy to work with. But the other part of that is like, again, not the client is always right, but you are always willing to like compromise or come to some sort of agreement when you're maybe on different sides of whatever this argument is. And I think my goal in any sort of like conflict with a client, whether that's like before we even sign the proposal, if it's about like a contract or a payment schedule, all of that, like my goal is to find the quickest solution. So it's not like strung out of us like arguing, like that has no benefit.
Well,
so I'm like, I'll usually, if somebody marks up my contract, I'm like, hey, I'll talk to my lawyer and I'm like, hey, these are the things that we're willing to change. These are the things we're not. Let me know if that's a deal breaker and we cut ties, or hey, we do it and move forward. Like, what's the way you can find the quickest solution to be easy to work with and to be like flexible, but not a pushover.
Right.
That's the balance.
Right. And again, it's you dropping the ego.
Yes.
And rather preserving the relationship and your integrity and not necessarily putting the focus on having to be right.
Yes. Yeah. I do not have to be right. Again, I'll say it a million times. I love to be proven right.
Well, Jamie, if we've learned anything from this episode, it's that if you want clients coming in the door, if you want that consistent lead generation, you really have to build authentic relationships. You have to have the systems in place to do that, and you have to focus on that, but you really, most importantly, have to be yourself. But you can't be on every platform. You can't be at every networking event in your industry. That is a one-way ticket to burnout land for solopreneurs. Ask me how I know. So we put together some shit you can't skip if you want to ensure that you've got a steady stream of delightful, well-paying clients coming through the door as your business grows. Would you like to share them?
Yeah. So first and foremost, and we've talked about this before, isolation is the enemy. So think about the spaces you actually feel at home in and enjoy using. Maybe that's Slack. Maybe you're a LinkedIn cringe fan. Whatever that looks like for you, show up there and be present and provide value. And think about too, if you are interested in exploring those platforms, what would it take to show up there more consistently? And speaking of showing up, if you're not carving out time, whether that's daily, weekly, monthly, to work on your business, so, figuring out those sales processes, yes, you got to do all that accounting stuff, all of that fun stuff, but also kind of refining your process, looking for clients, providing value to people, answering questions, making time to do that in some way or fashion. And ultimately just remember it's a numbers game. For every, however many numbers of leads you get and introductions, a certain percentage of those are going to be yeses. And you kind of have to come to terms with the fact that a certain percentage of those are also going to be no's. No's can be a little scary, but it's all part of the game. So, you kind of just got to live with it. You can use these no's as an opportunity for feedback, whether that's on, the way you're handling your processes or the product that you recommended to a potential client. So that is the shit you can't skip. If you don't already, follow us on Instagram because we'll be posting some questions and tips there for your sales process too.
Thanks for tuning into this week's episode of Scope Creep. We're your hosts, Liz Talego and Jamie Cox, and we'll be back in 2 weeks to talk about setting boundaries in your business. I'm excited for that one. If you love Scope Creep, leave us a 5-star review, and if you didn't love us, then please just leave. You can find us on Instagram and TikTok at Scope Creep Show. You can find Jamie at JMER Cox and Liz at LIZTALAGO. If you have a topic you'd love for us to discuss or a question you want answered, you can email us at scopecreepshow@gmail.com.